Welcome back to WJHI Studios. I'm here today with Evan Myers to talk about his new book, The Oldest Sport. So just to get it started off, what is it called and what is it about?
All right, so my latest book, this will be the second one that I've published in a couple of years here. This one is called The Oldest Sport. Thank you very much, by the way. It is a young adult sports drama. It is about he's a sophomore in high school. His name's Alan Martinez. And he goes to a high school called East Hamilton High, but it's loosely based on Jeffersonville High School. And so this is definitely a story that is about a kid that is not true. This isn't actually a wrestler on the team, but I've also met this kid several times, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He's a fictional character who's based on a lot of students that I've met here at school. And as a teacher and a coach here, I'm taught and coach wrestling. This is my 5th year now, and I'm just really excited to kind of share a story that is kind of in that genre and about that sort of a thing. So,
Well, having any experience with wrestling, I'm sure, has impacted your story. How has being a coach impacted your perspective writing this book?
Definitely. That was what inspired it in the first place. Was after I published my first book, which was Dusk on the Western Range. It was a young adult sci-fi and kind of a post-apocalyptic thriller story. Very, very different.
Very different.
Very different from my from this one. But I coach after school every day, and I just saw such incredible stories and such incredible opportunities that I could tell a young coming-of-age story about a person who, he's kind of a slacker, this character at the very beginning of the book. He's a little lazy. He's funny, but he's a little socially awkward maybe at the very beginning of the book, but once he discovers the sport of wrestling, he kind of comes into his own and he begins to learn a lot of life lessons from the sport. And so I saw those life lessons every day on the mats and coaching with the kids on Team Jeff Wrestling here at school. It's just such an awesome opportunity, Abby, that it's a life-changing sport, and I kind of wanted to try and put that on the page.
I've heard a lot about our wrestling team in general. We've done a few shows here as well. And I just know that writing from the perspective of a coach as well, it's much more different than other books you've seen where it's straight on biography, what it's like to coach.
Right.
In this one, you're pulling together those pieces that you have from different kids, which is truly amazing. And
Thank you.
Like you said, your last book is nowhere different, nowhere the same as this book. Tell us about your book a little bit and how is it different?
So the first one, I've been a writer my whole life. Before I was a high school teacher, I was a journalist. I was a journalist with the military for a little while.
Wow.
Very different types of writing all throughout my life. But once I got into teaching high school English, I'm like, I'm reading books all the time. I kind of want to start creating books of my own. And so that was one of my favorite genres is sci-fi. So I'm like, okay, let's write a sci-fi novel of my own. And that was my first kind of jump into long fiction. And once I did that, I feel like it did pretty well, and I was moderately successful at selling that one. So I was excited to explore other opportunities of fiction. And this one, like I said, this is a fictional story. It is a made-up tale, but again, so many of the themes and so many of the adventures that this kid experiences through the sport of wrestling, they're all very real. And so I guess if you're into sports, if you're into wrestling, if you're not into wrestling, if you don't know anything about wrestling, I actually wrote this book so that it would be kind of accessible to somebody who's brand new to the sport. Because my main character, Alan, he's never wrestled before, and then when he joins the team, he kind of has to learn the ropes, so to speak, of the world's oldest sport.
And I'm sure all of us, and I'm an athlete myself, I don't wrestle, but I'm sure I could find aspects of myself within this character,
100%.
As well as other people who might not even be an athlete, just
Right.
are interested in that.
Right, or maybe people who I've always thought about becoming an athlete, but I don't know, maybe I should give it a shot. And maybe this could be a source of inspiration for that.
That character could inspire us all to try new things and come out and try out Jeff Wrestling, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. Come join Team Jeff, and then you can wrestle with me at practice. You could be you could wrestle the coach and the author of this book.
Have flashbacks from this book.
Yeah, maybe.
So you said that you have different writing aspects throughout your life. You've had much different forms of writing. Describe your writing process to us.
Okay. Great question. My writing process is a little different depending on the story that I'm going to be telling. So for The Oldest Sport, the first thing that I did, I'm going to set this down for a second. The first thing that I did with this one was I just imagined the world that it took place in. And I've got a pretty good idea of what that is already, is because I'm in the wrestling room after school every day, describing that whole environment. You've played sports as well, so you know, like when you walk into practice, it's like you get like a vibe.
It's
like,
the vibe when you
yeah,
walk in.
exactly.
Tell what day it's going to be.
Right. And then the next step, once I kind of described what the life as a high schooler at this fictional high school was like, again, it's a lot like Jeff, so I had plenty of inspiration to pull from. Then I just started creating characters, and that wasn't hard either because I've met so many kids that are a lot like him. There's so many kids that jump into wrestling and they've never done the sport before in their entire life, but they're quick learners. And so they'll pick it up right off the bat, and then just even though they don't even know the rules yet, they find they have a knack for it. And then I've met kids kind of like Alan they came in sort of directionless. They didn't really know what they wanted to do with their lives. They didn't know what they wanted to do with their high school career. And when they found something that gave them a purpose, wrestling was able to provide that for them. And that inspired me, and I'm like, I kind of want to share a story like that.
Well, that's amazing. And also, like, your writing process really shapes my mind, because when I think, oh, I'm going to write a book, I think, oh, okay, let me just sit down with a pen and paper, and it's not that easy at all, or we'd all be writers.
Well, I teach creative writing here as well. And so one of the things that I tell my creative writing students is first start with the world. Create the world you want your characters to live in. Next, create your characters that can live in the world that you just created. And then the plot, for me, that seems like the hard part, that ends up writing itself a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Because you realize that, oh, well, this character could encounter this conflict and they could go over this problem. And in the book, Alan does, initially, the first, hill that he has to climb is learning the oldest sport. And then the next thing, I don't want to spoil too much, but like he encounters a challenge that it looks like is not going to be possible to overcome. So he has to sort of dig deep and discover his true potential.
Well, after building all that suspense up, I think the question we're all wondering is, how can we buy your book?
Yes, you can buy my book. It'll be available. It launches on Amazon this Friday, November 17th. I'm sure I got that date right. November 17th is my launch date. It will be available in Kindle books and on paperback. If you have a Kindle, you can, and it will be in the Kindle Unlimited, which is like Netflix for books. That's in that catalog there, and you can also buy it in paperback direct order. I will have limited copies available in my classroom, probably within a week or two. It depends on when they get ordered to me, but I'll have limited editions. And if you are a student of mine or a wrestler, then you can get a little discount for it. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, you might see me swing by your classroom in the next week or two to try out this new book. And I highly recommend everybody here comes and tries this book out. I mean, you heard a little bit about what Mr. Myers had to say today. And thank you again for coming out to talk about your new book with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can I mention something about the title?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the oldest sport, I'd forgotten to mention. That's the reason I picked that title is because in recorded history, you go back into like the Greek Olympics and everything like that. That was the first recorded sport.
Really?
Yes, and when you think about it, every culture in the world has wrestling. There's some version of wrestling in America, in Russia, in Japan, even in a lot of African countries. There's always wrestling. And I thought, well, it's a multicultural sport that the whole world can get behind because everybody has a version of it, and it's the oldest sport. So maybe that can appeal to others as well. So go buy my book.
Yeah, go get his book. Well, thank you so much for coming out and telling us about the oldest sport. I had no idea that was the oldest sport. I don't think it'd be in my top 10 guesses, honestly. But thank you for telling us about that.
Absolutely.
And with that, I'm Abigail Hammock. You can watch the replay of this on our WJHI social media channels. And this is 98.5 WJHI, the Red Devil Network.